The smell of freshly cut grass used to be my favorite scent in the world. It was the smell of a job well done, of a long day of honest work, and it was the smell of home. I've been a landscaper for 15 years, and for the last 10, my company, Green Thumb Landscaping, has been a staple in this small New Hampshire town. But lately, when the scent of grass clippings hits my nose, all I can think about is a different kind of decay. It started a few months ago. Not with a bang, but with the quiet hum of my wife Sarah's new life. She had always been a go-getter, but her promotion to a project manager at some slick clean energy startup on the other side of town had turned her into a stranger. She used to wear old t-shirts and jeans on the weekends, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. Now it was designer blazers and silk blouses, her hair always perfectly styled. She started talking about synergy and disrupting the market, and I felt like I was listening to a foreign language. I was a man of the earth, a fixer of things. She was a woman of glass and steel, an architect of things I couldn't even begin to understand. The first real crack appeared 3 weeks ago. I was cleaning out the glove compartment of her car, a brand new hybrid she got with her bonus, and I found a crumpled up receipt. It was from the Oak and Ivy, a place I knew by reputation. It was one of those high-end farm-to-table restaurants where the portions were small and the bill was anything but. The date was a Tuesday, a night she told me she was working late on a big project. I almost tossed the receipt away, but something made me unfold it. 2 dinners, a bottle of expensive Cabernet, and 2 desserts. The total was more than I spend on groceries in a week. My hands felt cold even on a warm afternoon. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into my jeans pocket. I didn't mention it. I just couldn't bring myself to. The thought that she might be lying, that she might be out there with someone else, was a poison I wasn't ready to drink. 2 days later, the second crack. I was at the hardware store picking up a new blade for the lawnmower. I was standing in the aisle, lost in thought, when I saw Sarah walk by the front window. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a genuine, joyful sound I hadn't heard from her in a long time. She wasn't alone. The man with her was one of those guys you see in magazines, tall, with a perfectly tailored suit, a confident swagger, and hair that was too well kept for a man to have. He was talking into his cell phone, gesticulating wildly, and then he put his arm around her waist and guided her out the door. My heart hammered in my chest. I wanted to run after them, to ask her who he was and why she was with him, but I was frozen. I knew without being told. The look on her face, the way she leaned into his touch. It wasn't the look of a friend. It was the look of a woman in love. I went home and looked up her company's website. It took me a few minutes to find him. David Sterling, senior project manager. He was younger than me, probably in his mid-30s, with a clean-shaven face and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. He was everything I wasn't. I was a man with calloused hands and dirt under his fingernails. He was a man with a fancy title and a perfect haircut. The betrayal wasn't just Sarah's. It was the entire universe telling me I was a fossil, a relic of a bygone era, and that she had outgrown me. For the next week, I became a ghost in my own home. I watched her. I watched the way she dressed for work, the way she checked her phone constantly, and the way she smiled at something on the screen that wasn't from me. She would tell me she loved me before she left, but it sounded like a habit, a line she had memorized years ago. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and emotions. I was angry, but not in a fiery way. It was a cold, quiet rage, the kind that settles deep in your gut and freezes everything around it. I wanted to scream, to break things, but I knew that wasn't the way. I was a landscaper. I had learned patience. You don't get a perfect lawn overnight. You work on it, you nurture it, you pull the weeds one by one until there's nothing left but a clean green expanse. I decided that this, my marriage, was a landscape in need of a serious overhaul, and I wasn't going to rip it up. I was going to let it rot from the inside out. My plan began with observation. I started checking her phone when she was in the shower. I found a string of messages with David. They weren't explicit, not in the beginning. It was "can't wait to see you tonight," and "thinking about you," and "I wish I could be there." Then I found the address for the hotel. The Blue Jay Motel, a rundown place on the highway near the city. It was the kind of place you go when you don't want to be seen. A perfect place for my wife and her corporate boyfriend. Her calendar showed another client dinner next Tuesday. I knew where they'd be. On Monday, I drove to the Blue Jay. I parked across the street and watched the place. It was exactly as I had imagined. Faded curtains, a broken neon sign, and a parking lot with more potholes than pavement. I drove home, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to storm the place, to catch them red-handed and end it all right there. But the other part, the cold, calculating part that had been born in the pit of my gut, wanted more. I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. The helplessness, the betrayal, the sense of being a fool in my own life. I spent all of Tuesday working on a big project for the town library. I worked until my hands ached and my back screamed. I was a machine, a robot. I needed to keep busy, to keep my mind from the images that were playing on a loop in my head. When I got home, I told Sarah I was tired and went to bed early. I knew she was leaving soon. I heard her car pull out of the driveway around 6:30 p.m. I waited an hour. Then I drove to the Blue Jay. I parked across the street just as I had planned. At 7:45 p.m., I saw David's sleek black Tesla pull into the parking lot. A few minutes later, Sarah's car pulled up beside it. She got out wearing a black dress I had never seen before, her hair perfectly styled. She looked nervous, but she also looked excited. They walked into a room, number 14, and the door closed behind them. I sat there, watching the closed door, as the rain began to fall. Each drop hitting my windshield felt like a tear I couldn't shed. I watched that door for 2 hours. At 9:55 p.m., they emerged. They were laughing, their hands clasped together. David kissed her on the forehead, a tender, loving gesture, and she smiled up at him like he was the only man in the world. They said their goodbyes, and I watched them drive away in opposite directions. I sat there for another half hour, the engine still running. I had seen what I needed to see. The cold rage had now become a quiet, burning fire. I drove home, the city lights blurring in the rain. I had a job to do. I got home around 11:30 p.m. Sarah was already in bed, her phone lying on the nightstand beside her. She was fast asleep, her breathing slow and even. I looked at her face, the face I had loved for 15 years, and felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. I went to the garage where my work tools were laid out in a row, a silent, comforting army. I grabbed a small bag and pulled on a pair of old coveralls. My plan had moved from observation to execution. My plan was simple, and it was perfect. David Sterling, with his slick haircut and his Tesla, lived in a new development on the other side of town. His house was all clean lines and minimalist design, with a yard that was perfectly manicured, a flawless green carpet of fescue grass. I knew this because I had done a little digging. He had the same landscaper as his neighbors, a company that specialized in high-end, low-maintenance properties. That company was about to have a problem. I parked my old truck 3 blocks away from his house, a ghost in the night. I walked the rest of the way, my bag heavy on my shoulder. His house was dark. I walked around the back, careful to stay in the shadows. I found his backyard. It was a perfect rectangle of green, with a little patio and a few immaculate rose bushes. It was a sterile, soulless space. I pulled on a pair of gloves and opened my bag. Inside, I had a bag of a specific kind of weed seed, one I had spent years trying to get rid of on my clients' lawns. Creeping Charlie. It's a fast-growing, aggressive weed that chokes out everything in its path. It can't be pulled by hand. It has to be treated with a specific, powerful herbicide. And even then, it can take months, sometimes years, to get rid of completely. It was the perfect symbol of David Sterling's affair with my wife. A persistent, ugly problem that would spread and choke out everything beautiful around it. I spent 10 minutes in his backyard, methodically scattering the seeds. I made sure to get it everywhere, especially near the foundation of his house and around his rose bushes. I knew his landscaper would have a hell of a time getting rid of it. I also took a small, sharp piece of steel from my bag and knelt by his sprinkler system control box. It was a newer model, a high-tech thing with a digital display. I knew exactly where to cut the wire. It wouldn't cause a flood. It would just make his sprinklers not work. The grass would slowly start to turn brown, and by the time his landscaper noticed, the creeping Charlie would have a head start. The perfect lawn, David's pride and joy, would begin its slow, agonizing death. Before I left, I did one more thing. I walked up to his front door, a polished mahogany thing with a brass knocker. I took out a small, dried-up sprig of creeping Charlie, the kind I had been pulling from clients' yards for years, and carefully laid it on his doormat. It was a little joke, a calling card, a message for a man who didn't even know he had a problem yet. I walked back to my truck, my hands now feeling warm, the cold rage replaced by a quiet, grim satisfaction. I was a ghost in the night, a silent force of nature. I had planted my seeds, and now I just had to wait for the harvest. I had a lot more work to do, but for tonight I had done enough. I had given David Sterling a problem that couldn't be fixed by money or a fancy title. I had given him a problem that only a landscaper could solve, and a problem he would have no idea how to deal with. My final stop was our house. I walked inside, quietly closing the door behind me. The house was silent. I walked to the bedroom. Sarah was still asleep. I looked at her phone on the nightstand. There was a new message from David. "See you soon, my love." I picked up her phone, my hands shaking. I deleted the message, then placed the phone back on the table. Then I went to my side of the bed, slipped under the covers, and pretended to be the man I was before I found the receipt. But I knew that man was gone. He had been replaced by a different kind of man. A man with a plan, the man with the creeping Charlie. And this was just the beginning. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just waited for the sun to rise and for the slow, agonizing process of revenge to begin. My world was now divided into two parts, the one I showed to Sarah and the rest of the world, and the one that existed in the cold, hard reality of my revenge. The first part was a performance. I woke up the next morning, kissed Sarah on the cheek, and told her I had a big landscaping job to get to. She smiled, a practiced, distant smile, and told me to have a good day. She had no idea that I had spent the night before planting the seeds of her future misery. The next few days were a strange dance. I went to work, mowed lawns, planted flowers, and lived the life of a contented, oblivious husband. But every spare moment I was a detective. I drove past David Sterling's house. At first nothing. His lawn looked perfect. He probably hadn't noticed anything yet. I knew it would take time. Creeping Charlie is patient.
I was too. I started a new routine.
When I'd get home from work, I'd check my phone and look at the weather forecast for the next week. I knew David's sprinkler system wasn't working. I was rooting for a drought. The universe was on my side. The forecast was for clear skies and no rain for the next 10 days. The stage was set. I also began to pay more attention to Sarah's behavior. She was busier than ever. She'd come home late, smelling of expensive perfume and city air. She was always on her phone, and she'd get angry if I so much as glanced at it. She started taking long baths with the door locked and the music turned up loud. She was building a wall between us, brick by careful brick. A week after I planted the seeds, I drove by David's house again. This time I saw the first signs of my work. Small, dark patches of green were appearing in the perfect lawn. The fescue grass, thirsty and stressed from a lack of water, was turning a pale, sickly yellow. David's landscaper was there, a young kid in a big pickup truck with his company's logo on the side. He was walking around the yard, shaking his head and looking confused. I felt a quiet thrill. He probably couldn't figure out why his carefully maintained lawn was dying and what those weird, aggressive weeds were. It was a problem that money couldn't solve with a single phone call. It was a landscaper's nightmare. My gift to David was beginning to take root. My next step was to expose Sarah to her own reality. I had no solid proof of the affair, just the receipts, the messages I had read, and my own gut instinct. But I knew where they met, and I knew how to get my hands on the proof. It was a risky move, but I had to do it. The only thing I had left to lose was my pride, and that was already in a million pieces. I had a friend, Frank, who was a local detective. He and I went way back to high school. He had a reputation for being a little bit of a rule bender. He owed me a big favor after I helped him out of a sticky situation a few years ago when his car broke down on the side of the highway, and I got him back on the road in a few hours. I called him and asked to meet. We met at our usual spot, a diner on the outskirts of town. I laid it all out for him. I told him about the receipt, the messages, the Blue Jay Motel. I told him I needed to see the motel's security footage, and I needed it without anyone knowing I had been there. Frank listened patiently, his face grim. He didn't ask me what I was going to do with the footage. He just looked at me with an understanding in his eyes that only another man who had been through something similar could have. He told me he'd see what he could do. A few days later, he called. He had a memory card from the motel's security system. He told me the cameras were old and the resolution wasn't great. He gave me the address to an abandoned warehouse on the other side of town and told me to be there at midnight. I went there not knowing what to expect. He handed me a small, unmarked envelope. Inside, a USB stick. He told me not to get caught. I knew what to do. I went home and waited for Sarah to fall asleep. Around 1 a.m., I went into the living room and plugged the USB stick into my laptop. The video files were there. I found the file from the night I had watched them, Tuesday of last week. The video was grainy and black and white, but the timestamp in the corner was clear. It showed David's Tesla pulling into the parking lot. A few minutes later, Sarah's car pulled up. I watched them both walk into room 14. I fast-forwarded the video. I watched them emerge 2 hours later, laughing and holding hands. I zoomed in as they kissed goodbye. The kiss wasn't a quick peck. It was a long, passionate kiss that made me want to throw my laptop against the wall. I took a screenshot of the kiss. It was all the proof I needed. I had a picture of my wife cheating on me with another man, and now I had to decide what to do with it. My first thought was to confront her, to hold up the laptop and watch her face fall, to watch her squirm and lie and try to explain it away. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't give me the satisfaction I needed. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling, the humiliation, the slow-burning rage, the sense of being a fool in her own life. I came up with a new plan. It was a long shot, but if it worked, it would be beautiful. It involved David Sterling's house, a little ingenuity, and the one thing he had that I could never have, his reputation. I drove to his house early one morning. I got there before he left for work. I parked down the street and waited. He emerged from his front door, perfectly groomed, a briefcase in one hand, his phone in the other. He walked to his Tesla, opened the door, and got in. I watched him pull out of the driveway and head toward the city. I went to his house and found the mailbox. It was one of those new, sleek metal mailboxes that looked more like a piece of art than a place to put mail. I slipped the USB stick inside, an anonymous package. Then I drove home and waited. I knew it would take him a day or two to find it. I knew he would be curious. I knew he would be a man of technology, and he would be able to open the file. And I knew he would be looking at the video of his boss's wife cheating on him, and he would have no idea who sent it. It would eat at him. It would make him paranoid. It would make him wonder who knew. That same evening, Sarah came home late, and I made dinner. I cooked her favorite meal, and we sat at the dinner table like we had done for a decade. She asked me about my day, and I told her about the town library project. I told her I was making good progress, but that the soil was difficult to work with. She nodded, her mind 1,000 miles away. I looked at her, and I saw a stranger. I saw a woman who had betrayed me and was living a double life. I spent the next few days in a quiet sort of hell. The silence between us was deafening. She was still busy, still distracted. She had no idea what was coming. I knew that at any moment the other shoe would drop. David Sterling would call her, and the whole thing would blow up. But I had to wait. Patience was my greatest tool. It was something I had learned from years of tending to the earth, from watching things grow slowly, painfully, and beautifully. I had a feeling that this revenge of mine was going to be the most beautiful thing I had ever created. The silence in our house was no longer just a symptom of our failing marriage. It was a weapon. Sarah and I moved through our days like actors in a play, each of us saying our lines, but neither of us truly listening. I would ask her about her day at work, and she would give me a rehearsed answer about client meetings and project deadlines. She would ask me about my landscaping jobs, and I would talk about the town park or a new garden I was designing for a client. We were so polite, so careful, so utterly disconnected. I knew with a certainty that gnawed at my insides that she was still seeing him. And I knew, with a cold, grim satisfaction, that the timer on her perfect little world was ticking down. My plan was simple now, and it had entered its final phase. I had already planted the seeds of doubt in David Sterling's life, both literally and figuratively. I had given him a problem he couldn't solve with money, and I had given him a piece of evidence that would make him paranoid and suspicious. I knew that he would have found the USB stick by now. A man like him, obsessed with control and his digital life, would not be able to resist the urge to see what was on it. He would have seen the video of him and Sarah, and he would have realized that someone knew. He would be wondering who sent it, and he would be looking over his shoulder. The next piece of my plan was to turn their paranoia into a tool against them. I started leaving small, innocuous hints. I would leave a bag of creeping Charlie seeds on the kitchen counter, claiming I had bought them for a project. I would hum a song I had heard on the radio while parked outside the Blue Jay Motel. I would look at her and say, "You know, some people just can't keep a secret." She would look at me with a confused, slightly nervous expression, and I would smile and say nothing more. It was a game of psychological warfare, and I was winning. The first major crack in her facade appeared on a Tuesday night. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie. Her phone buzzed, and she looked at it with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Pure, unadulterated fear. She quickly put it away and tried to pretend nothing had happened. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. This time, she got up and went to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. I heard her voice low and frantic. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew who she was talking to. I knew that the USB stick had done its work. When she came out, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She told me she was tired and went to bed. I waited 10 minutes, then went to the kitchen and looked at her phone. It was unlocked. The message from David was still there, but it was deleted. I had seen enough to know what was happening. He was scared. He was probably asking her who I was, why I knew. He was probably threatening to end things with her. I felt a surge of satisfaction. My plan was working beautifully. The next morning, the real fun began. I woke up early, got dressed, and went to the shop. Leo was already there, working on a car. I walked up to him and, without a word, handed him the phone with the video on it. He looked at me, confused, and I just pointed to the screen. He watched the video, his face going pale with each passing second. He looked up at me when it was over, and I saw a look of horror and a touch of something else. Shame, perhaps, but mostly fear. "I don't know what you're talking about, brother," I said to him. "That's terrible. Did you call the police?" He looked at me, bewildered, and I walked away. I had done what I needed to do. I had put the final nail in the coffin of their affair. When I got home, I found Eliza waiting for me. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "Explain this," she said, holding up her phone. On the screen was a grainy black and white video of me walking across the motel parking lot. The timestamp was clear as day, and my license plate was visible when I'd parked under the street light. "I followed you," I said simply. "Saw you go into room 12 with Leo. Watched you come out an hour later looking like you'd been doing exactly what I thought you were doing." Her face went pale, but she didn't deny it. "So you vandalized his car?" I expressed my feelings artistically. I laughed, and it came out bitter and harsh. "Let him. I'd love to explain to the police why I was at that motel in the first place." Eliza closed the laptop and stared at me across our kitchen table. "The same table where we'd eaten breakfast together for 15 years, where we'd helped Maddie with her homework, where we'd planned our future like we actually had one. How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Since Tuesday night." Maddie's got a big mouth. Maddie knows. Maddie thinks Uncle Leo is hot and that I'm an oblivious she's half right. Eliza flinched like I'd slapped her. "Connor, I save it. I don't want to hear about how it just happened or how you never meant for it to go this far or how I've been emotionally unavailable. I've heard all the cheating wife classics. You don't understand. Things between us have been exactly what they've always been. The only thing that changed is you decided to start screwing my brother." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 20 years settling between us like a lead blanket. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Chen walking her dog and the distant sound of traffic on Main Street. Normal sounds from a normal morning in a normal town, except nothing was normal anymore. "What happens now?" Eliza asked finally. "That depends. Are you planning to keep seeing him?" She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. "It's complicated." "No, it's really not. You're either going to stop sleeping with my brother, or you're not." "Connor, you can't just—" "I can't what?" "I can't expect my wife to be faithful. I can't expect my business partner not to stab me in the back." "What exactly can I do, Eliza?" Before she could answer, Maddie wandered into the kitchen wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt that said, "Sarcasm loading. Please wait. At 17, she's got her mother's looks and my attitude, which is a dangerous combination." "Why are you guys yelling?" she asked, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a carton of orange juice. "We're not yelling," Eliza said quickly. "We're just discussing something." Discussing was one way to put it. Having a civilized conversation about adultery was more accurate, but I kept that to myself. "Whatever, I'm going to school." Maddie grabbed a granola bar and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mom, next time you want to have a secret affair, maybe don't park your car where the whole neighborhood can see it." She left, and Eliza and I stared at each other across the ruins of our marriage. She knows, Eliza whispered. Of course she knows. This is Millbrook. Everyone knows everything within 48 hours of it happening. The only person who didn't know was me, and that's because I was stupid enough to trust you. I stood up and grabbed my keys from the counter. I'm going to work. When I get home tonight, I want you to have made a decision. Him or me, but not both. Connor, wait. I didn't wait. I walked out of our house and drove to the shop where Leo was waiting in the parking lot beside his keyed BMW. The word betrayer looked even better in daylight. We need to talk, he said as I got out of my truck. Yeah, we do. I unlocked the shop and Leo followed me inside. The familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings filled my nostrils. But today it felt different. This place had been our sanctuary, the one thing Leo and I had built together that actually mattered. Now it felt contaminated. Look, Connor, I know you're upset. Upset? I turned to face him and he took a step backward. Leo, I'm not upset. I'm way past upset. I'm in a whole new emotional territory that doesn't have a name yet. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to ask my permission first? Leo ran his hands through his perfectly tousled hair. Eliza and I, we have a connection. Something real. A connection, right? Is that what we're calling it now? You don't understand, Connor. You and Eliza have been like roommates for years. She needed someone who actually paid attention to her. And you decided that someone should be you. I didn't plan it. It just happened. I walked over to my toolbox and pulled out a wrench just to have something to do with my hands. When did it start? Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. I want to know how long I've been the joke. Leo was quiet for a long moment. Last Christmas, the party at Ray's bar. Ray's bar. Of course, Ray Morrison owns the Rusty Anchor. The kind of dive where locals go to drink away their problems and pretend they're still 25. He throws a Christmas party every year and it's always a disaster. Last year's party was where Eliza had gotten drunk and Leo had driven her home because I was working late on a rush job. So for 4 months you've been screwing my wife and pretending to be my business partner. Connor, it's not like that. What's it like, Leo? Explain it to me, because from where I'm standing it looks like my brother decided to destroy my marriage for a piece of ass. Leo's face flushed red. Don't talk about her like that. Like what? Like she's a cheating wife, because that's exactly what she is. She's leaving you, Connor? She's already made up her mind. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my expression neutral. Did she tell you that last night at the motel? She said she's going to file for divorce. Interesting. Because this morning she told me she'd make a choice between us. Leo looked confused, and I realized that Eliza had been playing both sides, telling him what he wanted to hear, telling me what I wanted to hear, keeping her options open while she figured out which way the wind was blowing. She's scared, Leo said finally. Scared of hurting you. Well, mission accomplished on that front. Connor, we can work this out. The business. We can figure out a way to know. I set the wrench down on the workbench and looked at him. We can't work this out. You crossed a line, Leo. You didn't just betray me as a husband. You betrayed me as a brother and as a business partner. There's no coming back from that. So what are you saying? I'm saying you need to find yourself a new job and a new family because you're not welcome in mine anymore. Leo's face went white. You can't kick me out of the business. I own half of it. Actually, I can. Did you ever read our partnership agreement? The one Dad's lawyer drew up when we bought this place. From the look on